Since 2021, an event known as the Greater Poland Uprising is celebrated every year on the 27th of December in Poland as a national holiday. After having reached over 7,000 expressions of support by a wide array of the Polish population, President Andrzej Duda, with the support of the parliament, introduced the new holiday. But what actually happened during that uprising? What were the circumstances that led to it, and why did it play such a huge role in Poland's story of independence? In 1793, the city of Poznań, or Posen as the Germans would call it, became a part of the Kingdom of Prussia after the Second Partition of Poland. After the Napoleonic Wars, King Frederick William III turned the newly acquired province into an autonomous duchy, with himself at the head, in order to avoid upsetting the Polish elite who were not very keen on the idea of becoming German. Polish remained an official language, most public officials were Poles, and especially schools soon became an important centre of Polish culture. Furthermore, Frederick William extended the abolition of serfdom into Poznań, thus making all Polish farmers equal and free citizens of Prussia. They were even granted a significant amount of formerly noble land to work with. The nobles did not approve. As a result, they organised themselves in secret societies with the goal of bringing back an independent Polish state in order to gain their old rights back. What's remarkable is that in the early 19th century, the idea of reviving the old Polish state was popular only with landowners, aristocrats and members of the clergy, while the lower classes, i.e. the workers and the farmers, tended to support their Prussian overlords thanks to the new liberties they gained. After a failed uprising of Polish nationalists in Russian-owned Warsaw in 1831, the Prussian authorities started to get worried and systematically expanded their control over Poznań. Many Polish officials of state were replaced by Germans. A massive fortification system was built around the city, for which thousands of German workers and their families were settled over. After another failed uprising in 1848, this time in Poznań itself, the Prussian government removed essentially all the autonomy and demoted the area to a simple province, like any other in the kingdom. After all these failed uprisings, the Polish elite realised that a change of tactics was in order. Instead of repeatedly getting shot down by Prussian troops for trying to revive the old Polish state immediately, many nationalists instead turned to the principle of organic work. This included strengthening the national idea among the previously unenthusiastic lower classes through the means of education, organised labour unions and modernisation efforts until the time was right. Polish newspapers and books were printed en masse, a Polish theatre was built, and the rapidly rising number of industrial workers became an important pillar in the Prussian economy. In 1871, the province of Posen became a part of the newly formed German Empire, and many of its Polish inhabitants found themselves as a sizable minority in an explicitly German state, and began to face various degrees of discrimination. One example of this was Otto von Bismarck's so-called Kulturkampf, or culture struggle, where he attempted to minimize the Catholic Church's influence in politics and education. To achieve this, he forbade priests to publicly criticize the government in church, he transferred Catholic schools into the hands of the state, he made sure that people's weddings were only valid if done by civil registry's office, and he stopped all state subsidies to the Catholic Church. Many Catholic Poles considered these measures to be repressive instruments against the Polish minority. In the province of Posen, the Kulturkampf also became a matter of nationality. This is hardly surprising because Bismarck made no secret of the fact that he wasn't too fond of Polish people. As such, German became the sole language spoken at schools, and Polish was no longer used in public offices. Bismarck himself argued that the Poles could, by understanding German, now access many sources of truth through the press, the speeches, and through conversations, without being influenced by a local clergyman. All of this would turn out to be one of Bismarck's most severe political failures, as Polish literature and institutions just continued to thrive. Ironically, one might even argue that the Kulturkampf massively increased the solidarity among Polish Catholics. So a change of plans was in order. Instead of assimilating and Germanizing the local Polish population, the German government founded the so-called Royal Prussian Settlement Commission in the provinces West Prussia and Posen in 1886. Its task was to buy up land from indebted Polish landowners and redistribute them to German settlers. A whopping 100 million marks were provided to achieve this goal, and until 1892 about 58,000 hectares of land were acquired. Quickly, Polish banks such as the Bank Ziemski and the Bank Społek-Zarobkowych were founded and supported by wealthy noblemen to counteract the German colonization effort. A short period of reconciliation followed when Leo von Caprivi became the new chancellor in 1890. In order to create a more functioning government, von Caprivi sought allies in the Polish faction in the German parliament, to a decent degree of success. As one Polish member of parliament, Józef Kościelski, put it, "It is not the existence of Poles in the East, but the attempt to Germanize them that makes for Germany's weakness. Give it up, and immediately you will have a power at your disposal." Von Caprivi agreed. Shortly after, Polish was made a voluntary subject at schools, and now even Poles could benefit from state subsidies for land acquisitions. In return, the Polish members of parliament voted in favour of many military and naval reforms. After von Caprivi's dismissal just 4 years later, that era was over and the Germanization effort continued at an even faster pace. Another 100 million marks were invested in the Settlement Commission, and on top of that, 3 wealthy landowners founded the so-called German Eastern Marches Society. It was an extremely chauvinistic and outright racist organisation that promoted the idea that Germans were somehow superior to Polish people and called for increased Germanization of Posen. Although the number of members remained very low throughout its existence, the German Eastern Marches Society was supported by many powerful people, for example none other than Kaiser Wilhelm II himself. In 1910 he built a massive neo-Romanesque palace in Poznań to demonstrate his power and to give the city a more German look. You can imagine that all of this, the discrimination of Catholics, the attempt to buy up Polish land in order to settle German workers, and the general German feeling of superiority massively increased resentment among all classes of Poles against their rulers. It was only after the outbreak of the First World War that the prospect of Polish independence started to become a slight possibility again. For the first time since the Napoleonic Wars, all partitioning powers were at war with each other. As such, each power in the war, be it Russia, Britain, Germany or even America, tried to win over Polish support by promising either very high degrees of autonomy or even an independent state. On the 5th of November 1916, Germany and Austria proclaimed the reincarnated Kingdom of Poland, a semi-independent puppet state. It wasn't led by a king but by a professional council of state, of which a man named Józef Piłsudski was a part of. Piłsudski led one of the Polish legions in the Austrian army, and he was the founder and leader of the Polska Organizacja Wojskowa, a secret organization of Polish freedom fighters that performed various acts of sabotage against the Russian Empire. He quickly realized that neither Germany nor Austria would ever be willing to grant Poland its full independence, so he managed to convince the Polish legions to refuse an oath of allegiance to Kaiser Wilhelm II in July 1917. For this, he got arrested and sent to a prison in Magdeburg, which only made him an even more inspirational figure in the eyes of many freedom fighters. In 1918, the tide of war was starting to heavily turn into the Allies' favour. The American president, Woodrow Wilson, declared in his 14 points that a completely independent Polish state with access to the sea would be created. The only problem was that the future borders were not defined yet. The Armistice Treaty that ended the war promised Germany full control over its eastern borders until a peace treaty was signed. The Poles in Poznań did not approve. They feared that Germany might even be allowed to keep the province and decided to take matters into their own hands. On the same day as the war ended, a member of the German parliament by the name of Wojciech Korfanty, along with his supporters, organised the Supreme National Council in Poznań. The council considered itself to be the new provisional government of Greater Poland. It was supported by many nationalists and also by Piłsudski's Polska Organizacja Wojskowa. At the same time, revolutionary German and Polish workers, inspired by the events in Germany, established workers' and soldiers' councils that also supported the Supreme National Council. Due to the chaotic developments in their own country, the German government decided that Poznań wasn't that important for the time being and didn't attempt to send the army to gain back control. Even when a Sejm or Parliament was elected in early December, whose members voiced their strong support for reunification with the rest of Poland, no immediate action was taken in Berlin, aside from some mild complaints that fell largely on deaf ears. Polish authorities managed to gain complete control over Poznań within just a few weeks, and without bloodshed. Things became violent, however, when the composer and patriot Ignacy Jan Paderewski arrived to Poznań by train on the 26th of December. During the war, Paderewski lived in the US and managed to convince Woodrow Wilson to support Polish independence. After his return to Poland, he was received like a national hero. From his hotel, he gave a patriotic speech to an enthralled crowd of people, with Polish as well as Entente flags being waved all over the city. Not everyone in the city approved of this event. On the next day, some German residents staged a counter-demonstration. This led to gunfire being exchanged between Polish militiamen and German civilians, or soldiers depending on who you ask. The fights didn't last very long, as already on the next day, Polish soldiers, many of whom belonged to the Polska Organizacja Wojskowa, occupied all of Poznań and forced the local German garrison to surrender. Quickly, fighting spread to other towns in Greater Poland such as Gniezno, Szamotuły and Pniewy. Usually the local German soldiers surrendered without putting up much resistance. German street signs and statues were removed and the regular German army was not sent in. After a few weeks, improvised German paramilitary troops, comprised mostly of volunteers and some soldiers from the army, managed to organize themselves into a somewhat efficient fighting force. They managed to retake some towns, and in some places, especially around the river Notets, heavy fighting broke out. However, neither the Germans nor the Poles managed to break through the lines, and in February of 1919, a ceasefire was signed in Trier, where Germany agreed to stop all hostilities in Poznań. In the end, about 3,000 people lost their lives. In June of 1919, Germany formally ceded Poznań to Poland without a referendum taking place as part of the Treaty of Versailles. Ignacy Jan Paderewski personally signed the treaty on behalf of the Polish delegation. Over the course of the following years, the majority of all Germans living in that province would leave for the motherland. And so ended one of the few successful Polish uprisings against foreign rule.